Hello, hello. Welcome to the My Inner Therapist show. Today, we're going to be talking about finding our truth. And it could be a little bit more challenging than we anticipate, which is why I wanted to have this discussion with you about it today. Because if you've listened to the show before, if you've listened to the podcast, if you worked with me, I'm all about simplicity. I think this journey of evolving and growing does not have to be complicated. And I think there is also an abundance of information out there to help us, but sometimes it could be so hard to sift through it all and to figure out what actually is good, what's effective, and what could be a waste of time. So I want to talk about what are some of the ways that you could go on your own personal, unique journey to find your truth, but also just to give you some foundation and framework of how to even get started. So I imagine that you've heard the phrase, live your authentic life and find your truth and discover your authentic self, which all sounds so amazing and wonderful, right? The options of going out and reading a book, and maybe maybe you've watched Eat, Pray, Love, maybe you've read Wild, maybe you have watched a movie that gave you great inspiration and you loved watching this person's journey and their self-evolution. And there are so many options for us to go out and get inspired, and it really allows us to see the benefits of self-discovery, and it helps us to find the release and peace that comes from accepting who we are. I'll share with you that one of my absolute all-time favorite movies, probably in my top 3 movies, is The Color Purple. And I saw this when I was much younger, and it had a major impact on me. I absolutely love watching, as the main character, Celie, if you've never seen the movie, and spoiler alert, it's like almost 20 years old, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna spoil it for anybody. Hopefully you've already seen it. But the movie is about this woman's journey of being oppressed, being discriminated against, being victimized, especially being victimized by the people close to her, the people that she considers to be family, and watching her as she struggles and engages with people and has experiences, whether she's called them into her life or they've shown up on their own. And seeing her as she processes what this means to her and determining the meaning for her, which is really what truth is about. It's trying to figure out what things mean to us. And as you watch her do this, there's this great ending where there's this celebration, and she's really come to this place of self-acceptance and love, a love for self, where she recognizes that she is exactly who she should be. And she doesn't need to make excuses for herself, and she doesn't need to prove herself. And so me walking away from that movie, I feel very inspired. To this day, when I watch it, I'm just as inspired, if not more, because I have a lot more adult life to use as a point of reference for just how challenging it can be, because adulting can be hard. So when the movie ends, or we finish reading the book, or we've listened to an inspirational song and the song is over, how do we apply that to our lives? What does that mean for us in our search for our truth? And I don't want to take you guys down the existential rabbit hole, because this video and podcast would never end if we did that. What I want to do is I really just want to get to the core of what our truth is, so that we know where to start and we know what we're seeking. So when we talk about truth, we could look at it from the philosophical perspective, which is that, truth doesn't require any kind of proof or explanation. I think it was Gandhi who said that, truth by nature is self-evident. And when we look at this philosophy, it really talks about how we don't have to have any kind of proof or explanation for what we believe to be true. I think in the area of self-development, it's important to recognize that the act of seeking truth really is about self-awareness and observation. So when we start our exploration, when we decide that we want to seek our true self, we first need to recognize what is our motivation. And we all tend to share the same motivation because we are all part of the human species. And we spend a good amount of our time living and behaving and responding based off of that part of our brain that is about survival and protecting ourselves. And so much of our motivation is really to alleviate what we feel like is a suffering or a pain as the result of feeling a disconnect, as a result of feeling like we're walking through life wearing a mask and pretending to be someone that we're not, or that we feel a tremendous amount of pressure from the external world to be something else and to fit into this model and to this mold of who we're supposed to be. And that can cause us a tremendous amount of emotional suffering when we aren't being authentic, or when we don't feel like we are living the what we consider to be our reality, when we aren't saying who we are and how we feel, or maybe revealing parts of ourselves that we're not necessarily proud of. Maybe we're struggling to take ownership of our flaws. And we worry that if we act in a way that feels natural, that it might be offensive to people, or people might judge us, or people might push us away because our differences, they can't accept our differences. And so that's where much of our suffering comes from. That's where we feel this pain as a result of having this person that we want to be, that we desire to be, that when we're quiet, we feel like when we're quiet and we're not being influenced by our environment and the people around us, and when we're not being distracted, there's that part of us in that stillness and that quietness when we're alone. There's that part of us who gets a glimpse into our truth. And we look around and we see our experience and we see our circumstances, and it's not in alignment. It doesn't match how we feel. And so that's where that internal conflict comes from. That's where we feel that disconnect, because we are, as I said before, we're living a life that doesn't feel like the life we had intended to live. It doesn't feel like the version that we put out there to the world is real, like it's our representative who's showing up. And we'll often talk about how our representative is the one that's going out and getting the job, right? You have your job interview persona. You have the person who shows up on the first date. And we all know that that's our representative. But what if we could show up as ourselves? What if we could show up not only accepting us, but accepting the possibility that other people, the world in general, may not be able to see us as we would like, and that that's okay. So when we talk about self-growth and self-development, what we want to do is we really want to talk about the act of seeking truth and what that practice looks like on a daily basis, or what that practice looks like especially when we're in the midst of feeling some type of internal conflict, when that disconnect really has us separated. What does that practice of self-awareness and observation and introspection, what does that feel like, and what does that look like? And I think the first thing that is so important when we decide that we want to take this deeper look at ourselves is to give ourselves permission to really just say, I want to see more. I want to see my truth. I want to look at the things that scare me. I want to look at the things that I'm not proud of. I want to look at the things that cause me to feel shameful or guilty. And I want to see those, and I want to look at it and be okay. I want to look at it and acknowledge it and recognize it, but also take ownership in knowing that I get to decide whether that's my truth or not. And so we sit back and we observe, and we do this from a place more of curiosity than judgment and evaluation and assessment. We do it from a place of curiosity and self-love and just introspection. And in doing that, we look at our emotions, we look at our thoughts, we think about our thoughts, we think about the behaviors that are as a direct result of how we feel and how we think and how we talk to ourselves. And we go a little bit deeper and we think about the motivating force behind those behaviors and thoughts and words. And when we think about what motivates us to say and do things and to think a certain way, to present a certain way, that's when we start tapping into what is really behind that need to present one way to the world when we're hiding that true version of ourselves. And most of the time that's based in fear. Most of the time that's based on the idea that I won't be accepted, I won't be loved, I won't get the connections that I'm seeking, I will not be able to fully express myself. And here's one that we don't often think about, which is, I don't know. I don't know who I am, because that can also feel painful, and we can also have a lot of emotional distress from not knowing who we are. Now, ultimately, our goal is to practice this self-awareness so that we get to the point where we have some insight about who we are, what we want out of our life, what's important to us, what our values are. And we get to a place where we also recognize that there's things about ourselves that we'd like to change. There's things about ourselves that maybe we're not exactly happy about or proud about. But we recognize the gift that we can give to ourselves, which is acceptance, and the freedom that comes with that, with accepting ourselves. And also accepting ourselves, we remove the limitations that are there by holding on to the idea that we're not worthy, or we're not enough, or that I need to be this certain way. There's so many limitations that we put on ourselves, and then we create all these rules for ourselves and other people so that we get to kind of keep that package nice and neat. But imagine if you allow yourself, if you say, I accept myself the way that I am, and I also accept that other people may not be okay with that, that may turn all other people off, and to be okay with that. Imagine that level of acceptance and how it can actually open you up to unlimited possibilities, because now you removed all of the barriers and the limitations and the rules. And so now we really can open ourselves up to have a deep exploration of what we really want out of life, to become a creator rather than just this person who's responding to the world, that we become a creator. Now, we need to also acknowledge that, and I think that this is something that we don't always talk about when we're kind of saying, live your authentic life, and you're going out and you're doing the workshops and the seminars, and you're talking about be your best self and speak your truth and, speak your voice. And we have to be honest with ourselves that there's times where we don't feel like the truth is available to us, that we have access to it, that we've been disconnected for so long that we don't really know who we are anymore. And it can be hard to find your truth because we may have never actually experienced it. And I want you to think about this, that from birth, we've been imprinted on and imposed on by other people from the moment we were born. We inherited the beliefs of our parents and our family members. We had beliefs and rules imposed on us from our culture and our education and our religion. And we were constantly being told what to do, what not to do, what we can say, how we need to show up in the world, what to believe, what not to believe. You shouldn't question anything. So from a very young age, we were conditioned not to be our true selves. We were told how to show up in the world. And in those lives, in those moments where you were in an environment and you were having an experience where your caretaker and the people around you allowed you to just be and allowed you to express yourself, maybe you were one of the few who got to see your truth, who got to feel your truth. And that's not a reality for a lot of us. A lot of us don't have memories of the things that we really were tied to, the things that were important to us, experience and memories of really being happy with who we were and having the space to let that just kind of naturally evolve. Some of us weren't given that opportunity. And as a result of it, we've all been kind of moved in this direction of conformity. And even if you had those great experiences where you were allowed to just kind of naturally evolve and discover yourself and experiment and get curious, you go to school and you lose that immediately, right? Because we're taught to conform. We're conditioned to conform. And we are taught to shun independent thinking. We are conditioned to believe that rules are important and that the way to find ourselves is to find other people who share our rules and who share our beliefs, despite the fact that the beliefs that we have came from other people. And what we're essentially doing is we're taking our inherited beliefs and we're just forming new relationships and new systems that just support those beliefs. And that's what we do, because comfort is also something that we seek, right? We seek to avoid pain and suffering. We also seek comfort. So here's where it gets a little tricky, because maybe we need to start looking at the meaning, or the meaning that we attribute or that we assign to truth. Because as unique individuals, our meaning of truth should be unique to us. And that doesn't mean that we can go around and start lying to ourselves and calling it truth, or lying to other people and calling it truth. And because it's our message and our rules are unique to us, that it means that it should be true for other people. It really is about deciding that truth doesn't have to be a destination, that we're not going on this journey and we're not doing this self-discovery so that we arrive of a place where like, like we have our aha moment and a light comes from, shines from the back of us, or it comes down from the heavens and shines on us. And in that moment, we're our true selves, because we know that's not how it works. What if we looked at truth and gave it a meaning that was more fluid, that was about a process, this introspective process that we go through on a continuum? Because our truth that we discovered a year ago may not apply to us a year from now, based on the experiences that we have and the information that we learn. And maybe we've had a life experience that has impacted us so much that our truth was shifted, that our truth was changed. And again, you don't have to agree with me. I actually encourage people to ask questions and have this discussion with me, because like I said, doesn't have to be your truth. And this may be my truth today. And if you tune in next week to the show, it may be different. I don't know. But I can tell you right now in this moment, what I'm open to and what feels really good is knowing that if I just stay on the path of self-discovery, what my truth, what that process could look like for me, and what it could be for you if you choose to, is that it's just really this constant act of clearing away the debris and the clutter and the mask and the untrue stories and the false beliefs. If we just clear away all of this so that we continue to have some clarity into who we are, and that we continue to stay connected, and that we're always in a place of being aware of any kind of internal conflict that arises. And we allow this exploration to just really be unique to our needs. And I think that we can do this. And I think that we can do it in a way that doesn't have to be so complicated, that can be very simplistic, and it can have a flow that works for you. It doesn't, you can take these practices that I'm going to share with you, and you can use them as you see fit, and when the moment strikes you and how it fits into your life. And because I really think that that is a part of staying true to ourselves, is learning from other people, but then adapting what they've taught us or adapting what they've shared with us. So I hope that you take this information I'm sharing with you today, and that you adapt it so that it works for you, and that you find your truth and meaning in it, and that if it doesn't work for you, that you discard it. It really is that simple. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can go about finding your truth. Always the best place to start is really by just getting quiet, by being still, and eliminating distractions. And so that means that you are in a place and a space where it's just you, and you're alone with your thoughts, and you're comfortable, and you don't have a cell phone nearby, you're not, hearing the ping of your notifications, that you are committed to just sitting in the silence so that you can create space for your truth to show up. And you can do this in the form of meditation. You can do this in the form of just sitting and being still. You can do this in the form of, lying in a lounger and taking notes and journaling. It's totally up to you. The goal is really just to observe our beliefs, and to take notice of the rules that we've created for ourselves, to also take notice of the stories that we tell ourselves, and to really just ask ourselves where they came from, to do a little exploration and try to figure out the origins, because what that helps us do, if we can trace it back to a time when we were 4 years old and we recognize that it's just a belief or a story that we inherited, or as a child we created it as a way to keep ourselves safe, and there really isn't any kind of evidence to support it, there's no facts to it, that we can start to recognize this as clutter and debris. And these are the things that we can start clearing out of our lives, the things that are no longer serving us. And so we can start questioning if some of the mental programs and the patterns and the habits that we've developed, which have really helped us to, we develop habits so that we can focus, we can have more conscious focus, right? So we've got all of these habits that are just running as automated programs, and we're driving and we're cooking and we're just doing all the mechanical things so that we can have conscious awareness, where we can think about things like, decide what we're packing for the lunches tomorrow, what we're cooking for dinner, to be more present and aware. And what we want to do is we want to look at some of those programs and see if some of those programs need to be changed, see if some of those habits need to be changed, and if they're serving us or if they are making our lives more difficult. So it's important to really question our programs and to question our patterns and our habits. And we also do this because we want to see if they've created any kind of limitations for us in our lives. Another practice that you might want to consider is getting real about what you value, looking at the things that are really, truly important to you, regardless of what external factors like family and cultures and religion, regardless of what are your values, where do you put such importance and emphasis? What areas of your life do you put a lot of importance on? What do you spend your energy and time paying attention to? And looking at those values, you can see if those values are in alignment with the person that you really truly want to be and how you want to show up in this world, or if they were a part of the costume and mask that you had been wearing for so long, or if they were really something that just was handed down from family members who were really just acting out their own stories and acting out their own pain. So we want to make sure that we get very clear about our value. We want to shed the things that are no longer serving us. We want to recognize honesty as, in getting honest with ourselves, it really is in the recognition of things that scare us. I have clients who will ask me, like, how do I know if it's, how do I know if it's a truth? How do I know that that's the real me and not just like my inner critic? Or how do I know that that's the real me that's talking? It really can be tied into your fear factor, right? The things that scare you, the things that make you feel really vulnerable, the things that you're worried about other people finding out, the things that you're worried about being judged for. Those are typically parts of ourselves that hold our truth. And those are usually the things that we suppress and that we try to hide. So that really is a good way to gauge if this is truly me, or if this is some story that I've created, or if this is a version of myself that I've just tried to present to the world. If it scares you, if you're worried about what other people think, most of the time that's our truth coming out. That's the thing that we're trying to hide. So we want to bring that to the surface, and that's what we want to start looking at. That's when we want to see if it's serving us, if this is a part of ourselves that we want to either recognize or celebrate, or we want to change it, and we want to evolve it and grow it. And I really want you to also get into the practice of honoring yourself and honoring everything that comes up and all of the things that you discover about yourself, and just honoring it, no matter what you think about it, no matter the meaning you decide to give to it. Just honor it and give gratitude that you have gotten in touch with it and that you've allowed it to come to the surface. One of the greatest ways for us to be able to honor ourselves and to honor the things that are important to us is to set boundaries. Set boundaries with the people in our lives, set boundaries with our external world, so that what we're telling people is that this is how I engage. This is my expectation for our engagement. And if you choose not to accept this about me, here's how this is going to play out, right? Then maybe we could no longer be in a relationship with one another. Maybe our relationship takes a very limited form. We get to decide that, and then we tell other people. We have to set that expectation with other people in the form of boundaries. And then we have to enforce those boundaries so that people know that we know our worth, that we have value in ourselves. And as a result of that, we know how we want to be treated, and we know how we deserve to be treated. And you should also really take moments for looking at, and usually this often means kind of tapping into our inner child, which is a practice you should be doing every day, because that is one of the most efficient ways for us to get in touch with our truth, is tapping into our inner child and asking it what it needs from us, and listening to its voice and understanding some of the wounds that it's holding on to, but also understanding its light and its joy. And one of the ways that we can do that is really take notice of those moments where we're engaged in some type of activity and time vanishes. It's no longer us looking at our phones and looking at the clock or watching time pass us by. Like, time is just not there. We're so present and in the moment and focused on what we're doing. And when we have that kind of connection, when we're able to dissolve time, that is such a strong indicator that you're doing something, you're engaged in an activity that is very much in alignment with who you are. And that's a beautiful thing. I know you've experienced this where, maybe you've been, and I'll tell you that for me, writing is one of the ways where I will sit down, and if I am in a zone and I'm writing, 3-4 hours could pass, and the only thing that brings me back kind of out of my zone is that, my stomach is growling, like I haven't eaten, I'm starving. And I know that you've had that experience too, where you've had something that just captivates you so much that it's able to kind of pull you into your own little world. And whether it's art or music or dance or whatever it is, it's important that you rediscover that, or that you connect to it, because your truth lies in that. Whatever activity you're doing, that is very much tied into who you truly are. And I also want you to make sure to listen to your intuition. That's another great practice for being able to tap into your true self, and also just give yourself, we talked about this before, like give yourself permission, but also just give yourself approval. As things come up for you and you're noticing new things and you're having this discovery and you're thinking like, oh yeah, when I'm painting, I am in that zone and time does pass me by, and that does reconnect to my inner child. And I remember I used to love that as a child, but I was often told that what I did wasn't important, that it was a waste of my time. And so we can see how we abandon that part of ourselves in order to meet the standards of another person. So when you think about your true self, you can find that desire to be creative again. And by reconnecting with that, you automatically close that gap. You start to help to close that gap that we have between this person, our representative, the person that's showing up in the world, and who we truly are. And one of the more common ways to be able to do this practice and incorporate all these different techniques and tools is by practicing meditation, by doing journaling, maybe just sitting. You can also just sit and record yourself. You can record your thoughts. You can take notes when something comes up for you, and just have a notebook where you take notes. It's totally up to you how you want to go about this process. And like I said before, it should be uniquely designed to fit your needs. And you really just want to make sure that you are creating an environment that feels safe, that is supportive, and that is just void of the distraction and influences that got us in this place to begin with. Okay, so to wrap it up, finding your truth is really about shedding the identities and the beliefs and the stories that other people have imposed on us. And it's letting go of the stories that don't serve us anymore. And it's observing ourselves by sitting in the space between who we are and who we want to be. And it allows us to become creators again. It allows us to decide that these things aren't working for me. And while I don't exactly know where my truth lies and what my truth is, I do get to create a truth based off of who I am in this very moment. And you get to create new stories, and you get to create new belief systems for yourself that are far more supportive and empowering than the ones that we got when we were 3, 4, and 5 years old. And we also get to honor our inner child by remembering what we loved to do before we were told otherwise, before we were told who we needed to be. So as our truth, or I should say as we evolve, our truth needs to evolve. And I love the idea of truth being fluid and flexible, because it leaves so much room for us to grow. It leaves room for us to question. It leaves room for us to shed things and to create room for enlightenment, and also just room to transform. And, I will say this, it's only the truth if you proclaim it to be, if that's the meaning that you attach to it. And once you embrace it, it becomes your truth. And in that moment, you can tell when it resonates with you, right? When it feels like it's the lyrics that kind of just melt into that melody that is you, and then all those beautiful notes just kind of come together with your natural rhythm, and in that moment, you're just singing your song, right? You're just singing your song. All right, until next time.